Hi, my dear friends. This is Daniel Karapkin. Let's share some words of Torah for Parshas Matos-Masei. I have two memories from my childhood of basketball player Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. One, my first memory, is going to a Lakers game in Los Angeles in the 70s and watching him shooting his famous skyhook. At 7'2". He was able to score thousands of points by hooking the ball over any other player's raised arms. I remember reading that he worked for years on perfecting that difficult shot, but by the time I had a chance to see him in action, he was truly a pro at that legendary skyhook. My second memory of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar is also in the mid-70s, when as a child I was sitting in a parked car one day on Wilshire Boulevard, waiting for my mom, who had run into Brentano's bookstore to pick up a new book. While I was sitting in the passenger seat, the biggest man I had ever seen walked right past our car in a three-piece white suit. It was Abdul-Jabbar, and I remember this look that he gave me, looking down at me as I was this young, prepubescent child, staring at him with wide-eyed fascination as he was walking by. He glared at me with the sternest, scariest look that I had ever seen on this 7-foot giant, and just kept on walking. It was a bit traumatizing to see this heroic athlete look at me with such a mean scowl. Many years later, long after Abdul-Jabbar retired from basketball, he traveled to Israel to meet, at that time, Rabbi Yisrael Meir Lau, who was at the time the chief rabbi of Israel. It turns out that there's this fascinating connection between these two people. Abdul-Jabbar's father, Ferdinand Alcindor, along with his friends, had helped liberate Buchenwald at the end of World War II, where an 8-year-old Lau had been interred. Alcindor's dying wish to his son, according to Abdul-Jabbar, was that his son visit Israel and meet the little boy that he rescued from Buchenwald and turned into a prominent rabbi. As Chief Rabbi Lau related after their first meeting in 1997, and I quote, "The first black face I ever saw in my life was in the broken gates of Buchenwald." The chief rabbi added that during the 1991 Crown Heights riots in New York, he had urged for unity among the blacks and the Jews. Just as they united in a time of war, they should be able to do so during times of peace, he said, adding, "It's time to forget all the differences and hold our hands together." Parshas Masei opens with the 42 places that the Jewish people encamped over their 40-year sojourn in the desert. When introducing the list, the Torah writes out in Hebrew a very strange verse. Vayichtov Moshe et motzaehem lemasehem al pi Hashem. Moshe transcribed the stages of their journeys as dictated by God, ve'ele masehem lemosaehem, and here are their journeys of their stages. The verse opens with stating that Moshe wrote the stages of their journeys according to God, and here are their journeys of their stages. Why does the Torah reverse the words stages and journeys, Motzaehem and Masehem, from the beginning of the verse to the end of the verse? Rav Shlomo Ephraim Lunshitz, the author of Kli Yakar and many other works, explains that Hashem and the Jewish people had two different perspectives as to the function of their sojourn in the desert. Hashem viewed each and every stop they made in the desert as a necessary place of growth and development. The Jewish people were not as fixated on the benefits of each and every stop that they made along the way. Rather, their primary objective was the final destination of getting into the promised land of Israel. So when Hashem was dictating to Moshe, God emphasized and preceded the benefits of each stage, of each stop along the way. He says, Moshe, each stop is vital. Focus on that. But when transcribing it for the Jewish people, their reading of that history of the 40 years was fixated and focused primarily on the ultimate destination, and therefore they focused on the journey instead of the stops along the way. And that's why the words are reversed. God had one perspective, the Jewish people had a different perspective. And this is the deeper meaning, he says, behind Rashi's quote from the Medrash, that the Torah citing of all of the encampments can be compared to a father who was taking his sickly son on a long journey to find a cure for the son's illness. After reaching their destination, the father reviews with his son all the places where they needed to stop along the way so that the ill son could regain his strength. Had they not made those necessary stops, the son's sickly constitution would not have allowed him to survive the ordeal of the travel, of the journey along the road. Similarly, Hashem viewed the intrinsic value of each and every station where the Jews stopped as a necessary chapter in their development and maturation, without which they never could have entered into the promised land of Israel, since they would have lacked the proper spiritual growth to make them worthy of that final destination. You know, most of us set goals for ourselves along the road of life. We think that our final destination is the goal, without realizing that the detours and the delays and the stops that we make along the way are vital in order for us to achieve our life's purpose. One of the benefits of reading this parsha is to remind ourselves that sometimes the stop along the way is not just a way station. The stop is the destination. Without it, we could not develop into the individuals that we are destined to be in order to realize our ultimate purpose. If you read about some of Kareem Abdul-Jabbar's life, you get an appreciation for the fact that as a young man he came across as a bit cocky and a bit of a jerk. When I saw him that day on Wilshire Boulevard back in the 70s, that scowl that he shot at me was probably representative of his general angry young man attitude and his disdain for others, especially those who were his fans and who adulated him. But if you follow the trajectory of his life, especially the experience he had by revisiting what his father had done during World War II to liberate the Jews from the camps, you see the maturation and development of an angry young man into a mature and sensitive adult. Abdul-Jabbar has, in recent years, become a thoughtful commentator and a person who seeks to build bridges within society. Just this past week, he called out a number of angry young black men, some of them fellow professional athletes, for making anti-Semitic comments on social media. He's been called out for this by the members of his own community. They call him a Judas or an Uncle Tom. But I think by this point in his life, he doesn't really care. He knows who he is and he knows where he comes from. Abdul-Jabbar said it very simply in his article for the Hollywood Reporter this past week. It's so disheartening to see people from groups that have been violently marginalized do the same thing to others without realizing that perpetuating this kind of bad logic is what perpetuates racism. The lesson never changes. So why is it so hard for some people to learn? No one is free until everyone is free. As Martin Luther King Jr. explained, injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. So let's act like it. If we're going to be outraged by injustice, let's be outraged by injustice against anyone, including Jews. We're all on a journey, my friends, and whether we realize it or not, the stops along the way, both during a pandemic and during normal life, are all to help shape us into the better, improved versions of ourselves that we are destined to become. An angry Kareem Abdul-Jabbar has become, over the course of his life journey, an ambassador for peace, tolerance, and defending the other. During these 3 weeks, we have an opportunity to learn from the most traumatic stop along our national journey, that of the destruction of the 2 temples. Let's use this time to learn from that historical station, that crucial stop along the journey back to Eretz Yisrael and to our redemption. Let's also take some time to reflect on our personal journeys and how each stop that we found ourselves at over the years has helped to develop and improve us. If we do our job correctly and we take stock as we're supposed to, then we'll play a vital role in bringing ourselves and the rest of the world to the ultimate destination. May we see it b'mehera b'yameinu, amen. And now that I'm back in Toronto, let me wish you a Shabbat Shalom, a good Shabbos. I really do look forward to seeing you as soon as possible. Take care now.